Alright, so a question that I've been asked a lot recently is, how do you investigate cemeteries and why do you investigate cemeteries? When I first started in the paranormal field over a decade ago, I was just 10 years old. And most of the haunted places I wanted to go to, they weren't open to people under 18. So I had about 8 years before I was allowed to investigate really any notable paranormal location. So about the only places that were at my disposal were graveyards, cemeteries, and other small little places. Mainly I could only do in the daytime, with the exception of places like the Stanton Train Depot, which I did, late at night. So cemeteries are really interesting to me because there is a personal connection, because that is where, the final resting place of all these people are. You can read their life stories, hear about their experiences, the cool things they did in life, the places they went, the impacts that they left. And then you can actually go, to their eternal resting place. Not to get really ethereal with it, but that's just kind of how I see it. And it's kind of bringing history, full circle. This place is haunted by Lieutenant Colonel Johnson, who served in the U.S. Army. You do all this research on Lieutenant Colonel Johnson, and then you actually get to go to his grave, or people claim to see him, hang out every once in a while. And that's just a really cool experience for me, especially since I love history just as much, maybe a little bit more, than the paranormal. So cemeteries are usually really easy to investigate. About the only thing you have to worry about is, of course, the location laws in terms of whether or not you can be there after dark, and technically skirting the line legally at what is dark, what's dusk, that kind of thing. Which usually after a while you when you're able to go into a cemetery. And then also the weather, which thankfully I have had really good luck filming and doing sessions at cemeteries so far. But early on, I used cemeteries and other small locations like that to kind of hone my craft. My dad would take me out to a local cemetery or a graveyard, and he'd be like, this is a voice recorder, this is how we use it. You introduce yourself, where you are, time of day, weather, all of that stuff. And so he really cemented the fundamentals into my head. And cemeteries were perfect too, because they are very solemn places. They're very quiet, very peaceful. Where I grew up in, southern West Virginia, in the southern Virginia area, cemeteries are typically left alone. Meaning, when you go to a cemetery, there's usually no one there. And throughout the duration of your investigation, more than likely you won't see another soul, unless it's, a ghost soul, which #ghost soul. I just kind of like that. But it's the perfect time to really work on your craft and find your investigation style. Normally what I would do is I'd take my voice recorder, I would do, 3 or 4 sessions, I would pick, different places in the cemetery, and what I would do is I would get used to introducing myself, going through the investigator steps. And then I would do my sessions, practice on, what kind of questions to ask, how to phrase them. That's where I learned usually give about 15 to 25 seconds in between asking questions for the spirit to respond before you ask another question. And then I also learned to trust my senses. If I did a session here, I would end it and I'd be like, okay, where do I feel led or compelled to do the next session at? And I would pay attention to what my body was telling me, my mind was telling me, what the spirits were telling me, and what the location was telling me. And I got really good at that. And that has been one of the most important lessons that my dad ever taught me about the paranormal. And that stuff I still use to this day. And not just for the paranormal. You can apply, that kind of thinking to really anything. I use it whenever I do my documentaries, or whenever I worked on a film project. I kind of pay attention to what my body, my mind, and the environment's telling me to do. And also, as I would get new pieces of equipment in, whether it be like a K2 meter, motion detector, spirit box, a new camera, I always take them, still to this day, if I get a new piece of equipment, I will take it to a cemetery and test it out, work out the kinks, find out, like when we got spirit box, I was like, how do you know what's a voice and what's radio? And I was very lucky. There's this old graveyard. It's an old Presbyterian church. I think it dates back to like the 1830s, 1840s. It's literally like 2 miles from my house, but it's kind of up on this ridge. and it's beautiful. It's very scenic, but it's very clear too, where it's on top of a ridge. So radio signals come in really clear there. So I would go there, a few times a month, 3 or 4 tops, and I would learn, train my ears to pick out, okay, that's a spirit voice, or okay, that's a radio voice. And after you're able to pick that out in your mind, it makes it really easy, or I should say not really easy, but a lot easier, at sanitariums, battlefields, places like that, really any investigation, to pick out what's radio and what's a spirit voice. So investigating cemeteries are great, not just for, being around the history, investigating local legends, stuff like that, but it's also really good training grounds. And I would love to hear your stories, because when I first got into the paranormal field, it seemed like everyone I talked to had a really cool or creepy experience in a cemetery. So if you've ever had a creepy or cool experience investigating a cemetery, leave it in the comments below or private message us. I'd really like to hear your story. And what are your thoughts on investigating cemeteries and graveyards? I know some people say, not to investigate them because there's some, let the people rest in peace, and I can understand that, but it does come down to your own personal preference, what you believe and prefer. But I hope you all have enjoyed this video. Once again, I'm Jake from Fife Paranormal. Don't forget to leave a like if you enjoyed the video. Drop a comment below if you enjoyed it, and then subscribe for more. Have a great day, everyone.